Let's check in with Joseph Lindsley in Ukraine. If you encounter any aliens from outer space before that, please let us know, okay?
Joe. Little fucking Joe Lindsley.
Joe Lindsley is quickly becoming an American treasure in broadcasting.
Welcome to Ukraine Bank.
Kyiv has come under a missile attack this morning. That's where Joseph Lindsley is. Let's go to Ukraine right now. Joe, are you okay?
Bob, good afternoon from Kyiv. Yes, in fact, I didn't even hear any of the explosions because the missile defense system here in Kyiv worked so well that the missiles were swatted away before they could even reach the city. So I saw some photos of a giant crater far, sort of well beyond the outskirts of the city. So it was a big success here in Kyiv. But this was one of these, sort of kind of weekly major Russian missile attacks that they've been doing since December of last year. And several cities throughout Ukraine were hit, including Lviv. A girl I know in Lviv sent me a haunting video from her building. You could see or you could hear the missile flying overhead. It seemed like it was going beyond Lviv, but just, to hear that sort of demonic sound in the air is a terrifying thing. Air defense worked pretty well in Lviv. There were some injuries, and some like 400 windows were blown out, but no major destruction. Several schools. There was a school and some other places that were damaged, but no buildings were destroyed. So once again, just sort of. Weekly Russian attempt to keep Ukraine under threat, but for what purpose? It's hard to see exactly what they're trying to target. And we have while this is happening, it's also important to note the news of it really is a big story, and now there's plenty of good evidence that the Ukrainians did indeed destroy a Russian ship in the Black Sea, the Caesar Kunikov. And so, this is Ukraine doesn't have a navy. This is really the work of Ukraine's HUR, the intelligence unit of the Ukrainian military, and it's extraordinary what they've been able to do to what was once perceived as a very mighty navy. And I would say the other big news, obviously, the strange news yesterday. I mean, there's strange news all around us, but Republican Mike Turner. On the Intelligence Committee, who was actually he was just in Kyiv a few days ago in the House. He warned sort of this very urgent, cryptic warning about a mysterious national security threat. And it was a strange moment of some kind of bipartisan unity. Leading Democrats also agreed that there was some strange national security threat that had to do with Russia's ability to launch some kind of nuke in space and maybe to attack satellite capabilities. Jake Sullivan, who's the White House's national security director, by all accounts, Jake Sullivan seems to be in charge of policy and of many things in the White House. I think this is becoming increasingly apparent. While the president speaks about ice cream at the Super Bowl, Jake Sullivan is the guy making a lot of key decisions, it seems. And he responded to what Mike Turner said and said that everyone who needs to know is aware of this strange, mysterious threat, and that they need to act urgently on it. Some Republicans and Democrats have said that this information needs to be declassified so that the nation can figure out, what exactly is going on. And of course, this occurs with the backdrop of, this spending bill, not just for Ukraine, but for Taiwan and Israel, and to deal with the border situation. So there's a lot of maneuvering there. There's a lot of people who are skeptical of what's happening in Washington. It's really hard to know, exactly what is what is happening here. And I think it's probably very difficult for many Americans to navigate this. And I think as we talk about like space threats and all that, I've wanted to avoid this topic, but we've had congressional hearings on aliens, not illegal aliens, aka immigrants, but actual outer space stuff has been talked about publicly in a way that it was mocked for decades to discuss that stuff. And starting a few months ago, there have been serious closed door hearings in Congress on this very topic. And there was even one hearing where a Republican and a Democrat emerged to the press, and they seemed a bit shaken by what they had been told. And when the reporters asked them, what did you learn in this hearing? Are there aliens out there? And the Republican, I believe she's from Florida, she said, not really aliens, but more like interdimensional beings. And, as I listen to this here in Ukraine, the skeptical part of me wonders if Washington will do anything possible. We'll talk about anything besides the clear and present dangers that require courage and action, perhaps, or maybe there's something to this. And I think it's helpful to point out that in 2020, December of 2020, the former head of Israel's space agency, he had just retired a couple years before. He spoke to the Jerusalem Post, and it's very it was bizarre, and it got a lot of attention. It spread around the world. He said that 5 countries had been in touch with an intergalactic alliance. He said that Donald Trump knew about this, and Israel, so the U.S. and Israel, and then he said he couldn't mention the other countries. And a lot of people thought this guy is losing his mind. He's old and crazy. But his successor, a few days later, spoke to the press. Initially, the Times of Israel, I believe, Isaac Ben Israel, the current chairman of Israel's space agency, addressed what his predecessor had said about this intergalactic alliance. And he said, first he said he respects his predecessor. He's not crazy. And then the key thing, which a lot of the media had missed, is that the current head of Israel's space agency said, we simply had to have a different interpretation of events. And I always hooked on to that phrase. What events? What does that mean? He says there's not aliens, but we just interpret it differently. And I think looking at those stories from 2020 might be helpful as we try to navigate this utter craziness that's around us right now, including the strange panic yesterday about the space threat, perhaps that Russia is involved in.
Yeah, we still haven't gotten a confirmation on what that was about, but as you say, most of the reports are centering around Russian nuclear capabilities in space. And meanwhile, where you are there, President Zelensky is vowing to clear the Black Sea. And by the way, has Russia said anything about the attack with the Ukraine forces sinking that warship in the Black Sea?
As far as I've seen, no. I mean, there has been chatter on Russian Telegram channels, which obviously they Russian military bloggers and such vent their frustrations. But officially, no, there's not been. There is, interestingly, when we think of that. Tucker Carlson's interview with Putin, or Putin's lecture to Tucker Carlson last week, there was one thing that Putin said that was very true, and perhaps this has been missed, but he said, this current war, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, is happening because of events in 2014. And that's true. But it's the question is, okay, what were those events? What was the interpretation of those events? And I've been talking with a lot of people here in Kyiv the past days, because 10 years ago this month, especially in the city of Kyiv, Ukrainians were in the Maidan, the public square, insisting that they saw that Russia was trying to get a firmer grip on their country, and they saw time speeding up, and they were just going to be sucked back into a Soviet system, and they really wanted their freedom, and so they stood in the square. In that cold winter 10 years ago, and the secret police began to attack the people, and that awakened the nation. And I've spoken with so many people who were part of that revolution, which really, the revolution consisted of people building barricades around the main square, and they just stayed there. They lived in the main square, all different ages, different religions, different political parties, and insisting on being free. And yesterday I interviewed on Zoom, a Ukrainian warrior at the front, down in the Zaporizhia front, called Valentin. And he said, I said, what, because a lot of Americans, when the ones who know about that revolution 10 years ago of Maidan, the public square, they think it was created by the U.S. State Department. And so I asked this soldier, I said, he was there at Maidan, and that's why he became a warrior. I said, what do you think when you hear that Americans think that one person of the State Department created this? And he said, he had almost had tears in his eyes. He said, it hurts me. He said, we risked everything for our freedom. And Putin knows it. Like, if that revolution had never occurred, there would be no war today, because, well, there would be no war in Ukraine, because Ukraine would be controlled by Russia the same way Belarus is. And as most Ukrainians say, Ukrainians could very well be part of a Russian army that would right now be threatening all of Europe. But because they said no, they're not part of that. And it can be easy to miss that part of the story and see just how much worse off we could be if the Ukrainians had done it. And I spoke with another friend who was there in the Maidan, in the public square here. And he said this was the first, that was the first successful Ukrainian state. Just people there living in the cold in tents. He said, and I've heard this so many times, they had their own healthcare system, they had food, there was no crime, there were no fights, they had religious services, and the people made their state there in the square until the regime got so scared that they fled to Russia. And now, 10 years later, Russia is trying to take it all away.
Good to remember all of that. Joseph Lindsley in Kyiv. Joe, will check in with you again tomorrow, but if you encounter any aliens from outer space before that, please let us know, okay?
You as well, Bob. Keep vigilant.
Thank you for introducing Ukraine on your social media pages. That's very important, that much more people can get more information about the situation here and how everybody can help Ukraine to stay stronger and to save all the world.
Что он сказал?
Well, which side are you on?
На чьей ты стороне?
Come on now. Oh, which side are you on?
На чьей ты стороне?
Ебать.